welcome to another Fast Tracks webinar. Event we do every Friday at 9 a.m. Central Eastern, where we cover various topics of the Fast Track software. See these events if you go to our website, FTx.com, choose the FTX Lifeline, scroll down about halfway down this next page, and choose the webinar link. This page will allow you to see a list of all of our upcoming webinars, the ability to sign up for our notification for upcoming webinars, and then view all their webinar recordings. Today we're going to be going over something that's coming up in the next couple of weeks in the next release of Director. It's user groups, and it's how you can easily manage all permissions. So once we go into Director here, if we go to the maintenance module, you'll notice there's now a user groups. The employees tab is still there, but the director logins tab is now gone. Now, as a prerequisite, you're going to have to tie, when this update occurs, you're going to have to tie your cashiers and your employees to director logins, creating a Fast Tracks user. Best practice before this ever occurs in your current version of Director, if you go to the logins tab here, and of course that's gone in the new version, you have the ability to an employee number for time clock in this text box here. Here's where you'd want to tie as many director logins to your employees using their employee number for that employee number and time clock field as you can. This will expedite that process and make mapping your employees and director logins much simpler and much faster, and you're getting this done before that update actually occurs. So let's look at the user groups. I've got a couple sample ones here made. If we open one of these up, we can see that you have a user group name. Below this will be effectively the permissions that currently exist under the employee tab in your current version of. What the purpose of user groups is to have employees tie those employees to a user group, and then all permissions for that particular employee is going to be inherited from their user group. In its current form, in the current release, of course, you manage every employee and their permissions individually. So if you have to change a permission for your cashiers, you of course have to go through, if you have 500 cashiers, you have to do that 500 times. In the newer version that's coming out, you just simply change the cashier permission of that user group, and then all employees that are tied to that group effectively can inherit those permissions. It saves so much time and it makes management so much simpler. As I said, all these permissions here currently exist in the current director that you currently have. That's under the employee tab. So we're not going to go through every permission. You can see that they all exist: your director general permissions, your cashier permissions, point of sale permissions, and your Android handheld permissions. Whenever you're building a new group, just simply choose that plus button. That allows you to create your user group. And then you tie those permissions just like you normally would. Now on the employee side, whenever you view an employee, you're greeted with a bit different window. So first and foremost, you're going to have the employee number. You're going to have the active checkbox. Of course, active means that employee can log in and use the system. If that's marked as inactive, they cannot. You have a require password change. And you have your other fields that would normally exist under the employee tab in your current director. What's their default store? What's their POS name? What's going to show up on the POS and what prints on the receipt? So you can have these two names be different. This could be like the first name and last name that shows up on your reports. The POS name could be just the first name to protect that cashier's privacy. You now have a director word and a POS handled private. Those, of course, are going to be if you're going to enforce a new setting called a password policy. We'll go over that momentarily. Other than that, you have your normal fields. At the very bottom, we have the ability to assign the permissions from a group. So notice that this here is pulling all their permissions from that cashier group. If I want to see those permissions, I can go to that user groups, I can go to cashier, and then I can see what permissions they currently have. If I go to the fast track user here, I can see that they're assigned to the administrator group. Of course, they're going to be pulling from the administrator user group permissions. Now, also on the screen, you can see the last time that employee logged into Director. It's going to keep a last login, and that serves another purpose that we'll go over here momentarily. Now, let's say that I want to build a new employee. You can simply choose the plus button like you normally would. It'll ask you want to generate an employee number. I'll go ahead and choose yes. And then I have that same window that I would have before, except I have to manually key in this information. Just going to put in name as act, password in place. And down here, here's where I can assign the user group. Who do I want? What permissions do I want to assign to this employee? If I check that, then of course it's going to be pulling from that user group. Now let's say that I want to tie them with their own specific set of permissions like I always have done in the past and not tie them to a user group. Just leave that as unchecked. You have the same permissions options as you have in your current director and under the user groups. You can manually assign them permissions. They can, of course, at that point be manually managed. The employee that I have here, that non-group employee, I've done exactly that. We can see that it's not checked. Also, if I look at here under the user group, they are not assigned to a user group. So their permissions, of course, are going to be outside of this user groups option. Let's look at a couple of the user group settings that's new. So first and foremost, you have to be an administrator to do this. So under your user groups, you want to make sure that you have the admin permission. If you're a current former director, you want to make sure that your director login has the admin. That allows you to have use of the settings hyperlink. I'm going to open that up, and then I'm going to go to the security. There's a couple of options. There's a require complex password, and you have a complex password length. This allows you to make your director login require a certain length of password. You couldn't just use the number 1. If that's checked, it's going to follow that complex password rule. If it's unchecked, there's no rules in place. You can have it require a password change every X number of days. That's the reason we're going to keep that last login that we just talked about a second ago. After that time length has passed, then it's going to require that particular person, whenever they next log into Director, to change their password. And if you're enforcing that complex password rule, they have to abide by those rules, meaning that it has to be that length, and they can't reuse the current password that they currently have. And then there's the option to disable accounts after X number of days of inactivity. It's simply what that says. After a certain length of time has passed, if that employee is not logged into Director, then their account is going to be marked as inactive and they no longer can use the system. So let's take a look at how that complex password works. If I go back to maintenance and I go to my employees, I go to my cashier here, there's that checkbox, require password change. This allows me to manually force them to change their password if I check that and choose save. Another way for this prompt to come up is going to be if you that password expiration policy in place and that length of time has passed, they now have to change your password. They'll be prompted this next screen that we're going to see. So whenever I log into Director as that particular employee, I'm immediately going to get this screen here. It's going to require me to enter a new password. If I just try putting in any number here, I'm going to get an error message because I have that complex password policy in place. So I have to use something different. We'll change that, and then I can log into Director. So those new rules are going to be a great way to kind of keep passwords fresh, and that way there'd be no reason for anybody to know anyone else's password. All right, so I hope everybody learned something new today. Like I said, this is going to be coming in an upcoming update. It's tentatively scheduled for the 1st and 2nd weeks of November, the full weeks. Prepare for this as best as you can by going into Director, going into your Logins tab, and then under that Director login, using that time clock employee number and tying that Director login to as many employees as you can beforehand. That will save you from having to map at the time of the update an employee to a Director login. All right, as always, these events happen every Friday at 9 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Eastern. You can see these if you go to our website, goftx.com. Choose the FTX Lifeline tab at the top of the page. Go to the Webinars button. Choose that, and this allows you to sign up for webinars, sign up for the newsletter, past webinars. If you have any questions, concerns with this topic, let us know at websupport@FTx POS.com. If you have any suggestions for future webinars, let us know at info@goftx.com. Thank you, and have a great weekend.